Hello and welcome to Arirang News. It's Tuesday, October 7th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. Let's check out the stories we are following at this hour. South and North Korea exchange fire near the de facto maritime border on the west coast, while the possibility of lifting Seoul's sanctions on Pyongyang surfaces. The first case of Ebola infection diagnosed outside of West Africa is confirmed. The WHO raises global awareness on how the hemorrhagic virus can be spread. And Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics' estimated third-quarter profit falls by more than 50% on-year. Analysts warn Samsung will have to revamp its smartphone design portfolio. And our top story this afternoon, a North Korean patrol boat crossed south of the de facto maritime border in the West Sea this Tuesday morning, exchanging fire with the South Korean military. Although it's not rare to see this type of incursion by North Korea, it is sending mixed signals as it comes a matter of days after three top North Korean officials made a surprise visit to Seoul. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff says the South Korean military issued warning messages and fired off warning shots. The North Korean vessel returned fire but turned back a short time later. Now, but that incident is not likely to affect the upcoming inter-Korean high-level talks. Watchers say Pyongyang will be asking Seoul to lift sanctions that were imposed on the regime in 2010. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports on the prospects of that happening.
When officials from the North and South sit down for talks in the coming weeks, the easing of sanctions imposed by Seoul 4 years ago will be a top priority for North Korea. The sanctions, instituted in response to the North's sinking of a South Korean warship, ban nearly all inter-Korean economic activities except those within the Kaesong industrial complex. Seoul says Pyongyang must assume responsibility for its involvement in the 2010 incident.
For the May 24th sanctions to be lifted, our stance is that North Korea must first take responsible steps that can be fully accepted by the South Korean public.
Considering North Korea had been raking in $3 billion annually from cross-border trade before the sanctions, its losses amount to at least $15 billion. In that time, Pyongyang's dependence on China has increased, its trade with Beijing standing at around $6.5 billion last year. Addressing concerns that the sanctions are standing in the way of improving inter-Korean ties, President Park Geun-hye has shown some flexibility. South Korean companies are taking part in a fresh trilateral project with Russia and North Korea, building a railway running from the North Korean port of Najin to the Russian town of Hasan. But before South Korea lifts any sanctions, it will also have to take into consideration the handful of international sanctions that have been slapped on Pyongyang over the years. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
The annual parliamentary audit began at the National Assembly today. Officials from a record 672 government offices and agencies will be questioned, but there are concerns that lawmakers are underprepared because of the months-long political standoff over the contentious ferry bill. Ji Myung-gil has more.
12 of 16 parliamentary standing committees got started with their audits of government offices this Tuesday. The Foreign Affairs Committee, in its questioning, urged the government to prepare thoroughly for high-level talks with North Korea that are slated to take place in the coming weeks. Regarding the possible lifting of economic sanctions that were imposed on Pyongyang after its attack on the South Korean warship Cheonan in 2010, the committee called on the government to be flexible for the sake of bettering cross-border relations. The Defense Committee focused on the possible deployment of an American anti-missile defense shield in the South to deter ballistic missile threats from North Korea. The Public Administration Committee criticized the government's botched initial response to the deadly Seoul ferry tragedy and asked whether dismantling the Korea Coast Guard and the National Emergency Management Agency was an appropriate follow-up measure. But the lack of preparation caused by the month-long political standoff has raised doubts about whether the audit will fulfill its purpose.
The parliamentary audit should not be seen as political theater. Lawmakers should refrain from scolding and humiliating witnesses.
53 government agencies are subject to inspection today, but some standing committees are already facing problems with absent witnesses and lack of cooperation from the ruling Saenuri party.
In Korea, a parliamentary audit of the government takes place every year. The ruling party usually puts more emphasis on recommending improvements to the government offices that are being audited, while the main opposition party usually focuses more on pointing out the missteps of the incumbent government. Kim Young-kit, Arirang News.
It's unexpected but still disappointing profit estimate. Samsung Electronics says its third quarter operating profit is expected to drop about 60% on year. With the recent release of Apple's iPhone 6 model, analysts warn Samsung will have to overhaul its smartphone portfolio if it wants to make up ground, especially in the U.S. market. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Samsung Electronics posted its worst earnings in 3 years for the July to September period, and they're not expected to recover anytime soon. In a provisional report released ahead of official third quarter figures due around the end of the month, the Korean company says operating profits have likely dropped to $3.8 billion. That's a near 60% drop from the same period last year. This is also 8% lower than the estimated average of 24 local securities firms. Samsung also said it'll likely post third quarter sales of $44 billion, down more than 20% from the same period last year. Industry analysts cited falling sales in its high-end smartphones as the main factor, such as the Galaxy S5, which was released last April, and its Galaxy Note 4 phablet released last month. Eroding profits in its mobile unit has in turn affected other Samsung units that supply things like displays and processor chips. Analysts say the star performer was the chip business, which was expected to account for nearly half the third quarter profit. The rise of competitors in China is seen as the main factor behind Samsung's declining global market share. The popularity of Apple's iPhone 6 and 6 Plus are also believed to have had an impact as consumers held back to wait for the new models, which were released last month. Due to this, a pickup in the fourth quarter is unlikely, as saturation in the high-end smartphone market is further driving down unit prices of Samsung smartphones while increasing the company's marketing expenses. Samsung says it's preparing new smartphone lineups featuring new materials and innovative designs. It also developed new mid to low-end devices to help it compete in the ever-evolving market. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Korea's exports in the information, communications, and technology sector hit an 11-month high in September on the back of strong sales of display panels, computer devices, and tablet PCs. Government data shows last month's outbound shipments of ICT products standing at $15.4 billion. That's up 9% from a year earlier. In particular, exports of semiconductors hit an all-time high at nearly $6 billion. Korea's handset exports were down 5%, however, with the launch of Apple's iPhone 6 and the continued rise of Chinese manufacturers like Xiaomi. And shifting gears now to one type of business facing tough competition in Korea. With convenience stores on virtually every corner, they are now trying to think outside the box to attract customers. Our Kim Min-ji takes us through some of their more unconventional services.
Convenience stores in Korea are pushing to become more convenient than ever, evolving into so-called living stores that cater to the everyday needs of consumers. The number of convenience stores has nearly doubled from just 4 years ago. This translates into roughly one convenience store per 2,000 people. And it's growing to become a $12 billion industry this year. But with quantitative growth approaching its peak, convenience stores are now seeking new sources of profit by offering a new range of products and customizing stores to meet the individual needs of customers.
7-Eleven offers diverse products depending on store locations. In this store, we sell flowers and have imported a French underwear brand. We're also planning to offer more products that meet the needs of single-person households.
Non-food products now make up about 17% of 7-Eleven sales, and the plan is to boost that figure to 20% next year. GS25, another popular convenience store, is offering a lineup of tech goods from cell phones and televisions to water purifiers. And some take it to another level by offering space to enjoy a cup of coffee or hold meetings.
I didn't know these rooms existed. I hope to use one in the future with my friends when I do team assignments.
Customers can reserve these rooms at just $1 per hour, along with free Wi-Fi access, printing facilities, and laptop rentals.
We created this space with the purpose of attracting more customers by offering convenience. People visit our store not just to buy food, but to spend time.
By shifting focus from their traditional money makers like instant foods towards new goods and services, convenience stores are striving to be more than just a quick stop shop. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
In the year 2012 for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. The Ebola scare has now reached Europe with the report of a first infection outside of West Africa. The development has the World Health Organization upping global awareness on the deadly virus. Shin Se-min has this report.
A Spanish nurse has become the first person to contract the Ebola virus outside West Africa in the current outbreak. Spain's health minister confirmed Monday that the woman, described as sanitary technician, had treated 2 Ebola patients in Madrid who later died. She has been transferred to a hospital in Madrid for treatment, and 30 healthcare workers who came into contact with her will remain under observation for 3 weeks. In the United States, the Obama administration is working on bolstering its defenses against Ebola.
We're also going to be working on protocols to do additional passenger screening, both at the source and here in the United States. All of these things make me confident that here in the United States, at least, the chances of an outbreak of an epidemic here are extraordinarily low.
6 people have so far been treated for Ebola in the United States. 1 American man developed symptoms a week or so after coming into contact with an infected person in Liberia. The administration says a travel ban from West Africa is not an option at the moment. Looking to raise global awareness, the World Health Organization announced Monday that although Ebola is not an airborne virus like flu, it can be passed through breast milk and urine. The WHO stressed in particular that the virus can persist in semen for at least 70 days. Ebola can also be transmitted through direct contact with the bodily fluids of an infected person, including blood, sweat, and saliva. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And on to the situation in Hong Kong. Formal dialogue between pro-democracy activists and government officials could begin as early as this week, as the crowds of protesters occupying the streets have significantly receded. A second round of preparatory meetings were held by representatives of both sides last night. They reaffirmed that there will be several rounds of negotiations and that both sides will be held on equal footing, with the results of the talks to be confirmed and implemented by the government. Now, this comes after student protesters lifted a blockade to government offices on Monday, with schools and businesses reopening as well. Last night, more than 1,000 protesters gathered in 3 locations without incident to continue their call for universal suffrage in Hong Kong's chief executive election slated for 2017. Japan's foreign minister says he will consider removing a comment on the ministry website that says the wartime sexual enslavement was a clear violation of human rights and dignity of women. Speaking at Parliament on Monday, Fumio Kishida said his ministry will soon decide whether to delete it or add extra commentary. The statement introduces the Asian Women's Fund, which received private donations for the sex slave victims from 1995 to 2007. The minister was responding to a question by an opposition lawmaker who said he didn't believe Japan coerced women to sexual slavery in the early 20th century. Nobel Prize week has begun with the first one being awarded in Sweden on Monday. It went to 3 scientists for uncovering something the Nobel Committee says has occupied the minds of philosophers and scientists for centuries. Park Ji-won reports.
The Norwegian husband and wife team of May-Britt Moser and Edvard Moser, together with their British-American colleague John O'Keefe, have been awarded the prestigious Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine for discovering the human brain's GPS system. The discovery of so-called grid cells that become active when trying to map and navigate the outside world explains how the brain knows where we are and is able to guide us from point A to point B.
Everyone is here to celebrate with us today. It is absolutely fantastic. What we're interested in is to register small signals, electrical signs from the brain, so that we uncover the mysteries of the brain, such as sense of place and memory.
May-Britt Moser's husband and co-researcher Edvard was told the news after getting off a flight from Germany.
Of course, I'm full of gratitude. It's a great moment.
O'Keefe explains the possible ramifications of the team's studies, including how it could ultimately help Alzheimer's patients and stroke victims.
Once we understand how an aspect of the world, in this case an aspect of the brain works, we then will start thinking about, well, what goes wrong with that part of the brain? How does it go wrong in, for example, Alzheimer's disease?
The trio of scientists will receive 8 million Swedish crowns, or some $1.1 million for broadening our understanding of the human brain's cognitive functions. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
This time of the year, with beautiful fall weather in full swing, Korea has a countless number of festivals underway across the nation. But if you can't venture too far away from the capital, you might want to pay extra attention to this next report, as our Son Jung-in gives us the details about 3 festivals taking place on the outskirts of Seoul.
Producing a thunderous noise, the Black Eagles demonstrate their acrobatic moves, crisscrossing in perfect unison. Using the sky as a canvas on which to draw, the aerobatic team glides through the air, sketching different pictures with the white smoke from their tails. The vast sky is filled with planes shooting high into the air and plunging down again.
The most interesting maneuvers are the tumbles, where the airplane literally tumbles head over heels, and also the reverse airflow maneuvers, where the airplane goes backwards. Also, the airplane can be flown in knife-edge flight on its side for long periods of time, and of course inverted.
Also in Gyeonggi-do Province, the Yeoju Ceramic Festival is in full swing this week in the city of Yeoju. The festival features many ceramic works from various artists, as well as a range of hands-on activities such as baking your own pottery creation or smashing them to relieve your stress away. And over in the nearby city of Suwon, the Suwon Hwasong Cultural Festival will get underway, inviting local and foreign visitors to Hwasong Fortress, a UNESCO World Cultural Heritage Site. Visitors can have fun while learning more about Korea's Joseon Dynasty era.
There are so many festivals taking place this week in Gyeonggi-do Province. We have the Air Show and the Suwon Festival. I hope people take some time to enjoy this splendid weather with their family and friends.
Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, if you don't want to stay outdoors, don't worry. There are also indoor activities specifically targeted for this time of the year. Im Yoon-hee joins us today with some of those cultural events. Good afternoon, Yoon-hee.
Good afternoon. Right, so we just saw with so much going on outdoors, it's worth it to kind of mention that there are indoor activities still taking place. So today I have a few plays that have recently kicked off here in the capital, so take a look.
Instead of heading to the movie theaters this fall, there is always the option of live performances. And at the Soohyunjae Theater, a few familiar faces make an appearance. Veteran actors, usually seen on the TV screen, bring decades of experience to the cast of On Golden Pond.
Even though this is the talk of the elderly, anyone can come watch the performance and understand what we're saying. These are everyday sentiments we are talking about.
On Golden Pond is a story about an elderly couple who return year after year to the Golden Pond and are joined one year by their daughter and her family. Through their time together, the families bond both on stage and in the audience.
Watching, I realized that like the main elderly character, I wanted to live life with no regrets. The play was very meaningful and left me in high spirits.
Eventually, children will move on, and the only one left will be your spouse. When I go home today, I think I'll be especially grateful for my husband.
Sometimes, a slower pace can leave a more lasting impression. The sad play follows the story of a couple with a bleak future ahead, one where they must part forever. But they go through their grief with composure and grace, and most of all love, as they face a challenge together. It's a play that stays true to its name, but also gives the audience a reason to pause and think. A play that uniquely illustrates some of the darker truths of our society, about split families and outcasts. The Invisible Man shows that even though family can be a source of life and strength, it can also be complicated. Nowadays, the idea of a traditional family is something that needs to be addressed. So this play illustrates a real family with real meaning and worth.
Even though everything seems at peace, there's always risk. Our society is like that. Even our families are like that, which is what I want to really take to heart.
So that play, The Invisible Man, seems to be a good play to go watch with the family, with the whole family.
Right, a good excuse. Families here in Korea, they're so busy, with work, lessons, tutoring, and so things like these plays really make you, spend more time with your family and just pause and take a break. And so with The Invisible Man, it's actually received quite a bit of attention recently in festivals and events because it takes a very unique approach to this idea and it's a very unique approach to theater and to play as well.
And we saw many familiar faces in the plays as well. And I'm a huge fan of veteran actor Lee Sun-jae, and he's usually known to be he's usually known to not accept roles that are double cast, but you were telling me earlier that in that play the role is double cast.
So Lee Sun-jae, as well as the other people involved, they're very busy actors, lots of things on their plate. So with this, he said that he did have to take on a role that is double casted, but at the same time he said he regrets that because you have to really consider the chemistry that's involved, and so when you're constantly switching partners, it really does change the atmosphere. And so although he loves the performance, loves the play, he said he'd prefer not to be double casted. But a really good performance to go check out. It's a very famous play by a very famous playwright, and so very famous actors as well, and so a very good done.
All right, so one play not to miss this autumn. All right, thank you, Yoon-hee, for today's report.
My pleasure.
Good afternoon. We've been enjoying mostly to partly sunny skies, which are expected throughout the day across most of the country. And the chilly morning has turned into a cool afternoon, with the daily highs are expected to be similar to a tad higher than yesterday. So let's take a closer look at the readings for today. Now, the daytime highs in the capital and Daegu, Busan should all rise to 22 and 23, while Gwangju will peak at 24 this afternoon. afternoon. Now for other regions, it looks like down on Daejeon will peak at 23, Jeju rises 22, while Dokdo peaks at 19. And it seems like we'll have a chilly morning through the end of the week, but the highs will be a bit milder. But do be aware of the big temperature gap between lows and highs and dress accordingly to avoid catching a cold. Well, that's all for me today, and let's send it back to Hyun-kyung in the studio.
All right, thank you, Ji-hyun, for that. That brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with more updates at 4 p.m. Korea time.